There are cases that are puzzling, in which people disappear without a trace from one moment to the next, as if swallowed up by the earth. And then there are cases like that of Holly Bobo. A case in which everything may seem clear at the beginning, tragic but easily solvable. But at some point, so many different statements, clues, and people emerge that it is impossible to keep track of everything. What happens when you can't seem to trust a single statement in a murder investigation? Holly Bobo is 20 years old. She's training to be a nurse and is fully committed to the job. Of course, this stage of life is quite expensive, especially in the USA. To save a little money, Holly still lives with her parents. It just makes sense. They are both pretty relaxed, and Holly's older brother Clint also still lives at home. Sure, everyone has their own daily routine, and the family doesn't necessarily make sure to eat lunch together every day, but they live under the same roof and are still very close. Holly is an absolute early riser. On April 13, 2011, her alarm goes off at 4:30 a.m. Holly doesn't have an appointment, but she wants to use the morning to study. It speaks volumes about how disciplined she is. Others her age are probably just coming home at this time of day. Holly, on the other hand, sits down at her desk and opens her books. At around 7:30 a.m., she makes a brief phone call to her boyfriend Drew Scott to wish him a good morning. Drew is also up early that day because he is turkey hunting. Holly's grandmother has allowed her granddaughter's boyfriend to hunt on her property. In the U.S. state of Tennessee, turkey hunting is something of a national pastime, and the season starts in mid-April. Holly and Drew talk briefly before both go back to their respective activities. Holly's parents have now left for work. Her brother Clint is still asleep, and her boyfriend Drew is out hunting turkeys. And Holly Bobo herself? She disappears. Because within a few minutes, she is kidnapped from her own parents' house, and her brother Clint becomes a witness to the whole thing. What happens next is really strange, so it's best to try to listen very carefully so as not to lose track of what's going on. So, at around 7:30, Holly is on the phone with her friend Drew. Just a few minutes later, a neighbor who lives near the Bobo's house is startled. He has heard the piercing scream of a young woman. He is sure that the scream came from the Bobo family's house. The witness's mother then calls Holly's mother Karen. She's already at work at this point. When Holly's mother hears about the scream, she wants to be on the safe side and call 911. The problem is that she works in a different county. The control center therefore puts her through to the wrong police station, which is why everything is a bit delayed. But Holly is not home alone. Her brother Clint is still there too. He wakes up at about the same time because the family dogs are barking very loudly. Clint goes to the window and looks out. And what he sees then becomes the most important testimony in this case. Because outside, he sees his sister Holly with a man wearing camouflage clothing. Clint's testimony is later quoted as follows. It seemed to be Holly kneeling down and Drew. It looked like they were kneeling across from each other in front of the garage, talking back and forth. Holly sounded very upset and angry. He was doing most of the talking and she was answering him back and forth. I could barely catch a word. The only words I could make out from here were Holly's words. No, why? Clint, who woke up a few seconds ago, sees his sister outside the family garage. And with a man. He believes that this man is Holly's boyfriend and that the two are having a heated argument. Meanwhile, Holly and Clint's mother is panicking on the house phone. Clint tells his mother what he sees outside. Karen insists on the phone that the man outside is definitely not Drew. Clint should get the gun out of the closet and shoot the man. But Clint hesitates because he still thinks that the man outside is Drew. When Clint looks out the window again, he sees that the man outside is much taller than Holly's boyfriend Drew. But this realization comes too late. Clint sees the man in camouflage clothing leading his sister Holly into the nearby forest. He then dials both Holly's and Drew's cell phone numbers. Neither of them answers. Karen also asks Clint to call 911 so that the call goes to the right station this time. Clint does just that. While he is waiting for the police, he goes outside, the family gun in his hand. But Holly and the man have disappeared. Instead, Clint finds traces of blood in the garage. As it turns out later, the blood belongs to his sister. And the blood is all that remains of Holly Bobo. Holly Bobo remains missing for more than 3 years, until September 2014. The remains of Holly Bobo are found in a forest in Decatur County. Hunters found a few ribs, a shoulder, and Holly's skull and teeth. A bullet hole can still be seen at the back of the skull, which also reveals the cause of death. It is unclear whether Holly's body was cut up or whether it was picked apart piece by animals in the forest. Of course, the police have not been completely inactive in the 3 years since Holly's disappearance. The first thing that happened was that Terry Britt was investigated relatively early on. He is a registered offender and lives very close to the Bobo's house. But although his house was searched and his phone was tapped for a while, no evidence was found that he had anything to do with Holly's disappearance. Then suddenly there was a highly interesting and incriminating statement. It comes from a young man named Dylan Adams. He is in prison for a weapons offense. It is still not known how Dylan came to talk to the police about the disappearance of Holly Bobo. But he did. And he provided some pretty explosive information. Dylan says that he saw Holly on the day she disappeared at his brother Zach Adams' house. A friend of Zach's was also there, a man named Jason Wayne Autry. Dylan continues by saying that Zach told him that he raped Holly and filmed the whole thing with a video camera. However, Dylan later withdrew this statement and said that he was forced to make these allegations. In fact, the alleged video of Holly was never found. In addition, Dylan Adams has an intellectual disability. Unfortunately, nothing more is known about how this manifests itself. But this allows for speculation that Dylan may have been easily influenced. Although Dylan withdraws the statement, investigations are carried out against Dylan himself, as well as against Zach and his friend Jason. In addition, a fourth man named Shane Austin was arrested, who was another acquaintance of the other men. Shane's name appeared in Zach Adams' phone records. On the day of Holly's disappearance, the two had several phone conversations with each other. As the police deduced, probably to find a hiding place for the body of the kidnapped Holly Bobo. Shane doesn't deny it either. He even makes a deal with the investigators. The whole thing takes place before Holly's body is found. At the time, the police promise Shane a lesser prison sentence if he tells them where they have hidden Holly. And Shane goes for this deal. That alone is an implicit confession and shows that the police are on the right track. But somehow the deal falls through. It is unclear whether Shane was unable or unwilling to lead the police to the body, and we will never know for sure. In February 2015, Shane Austin was found dead. He had taken his own life. If you find the whole thing confusing already, we have to throw the names of 2 more suspects into the mix, because a few months after Zach, Dylan, Jason, and Shane are investigated, 2 more men are arrested as possible accomplices. They are Jeffrey and Mark Piercy and are brothers. Both are arrested on the basis of a statement by Jeffrey's former roommate. She claims that Jeffrey showed her a video in which Jeffrey physically abused a tied-up Holly Bobo. According to the roommate, Jeffrey's brother Mark filmed the whole thing. But this alleged video can never be found either. Furthermore, there is no evidence that the Piercy brothers knew the other 4 suspects. Therefore, the investigation against Jeffrey and Mark is dropped. The accusations against the other 4 men remain, however. In 2017, the district attorney's office has gathered enough evidence to prosecute Zach Adams. While he was originally incriminated by his own brother, it is now Jason Autry who is testifying against him in court. Jason says he had nothing to do with the kidnapping and murder of Holly, but was a witness. He says he saw Holly's body in the trunk of Zach's car. He also saw Zach, Dylan, and Shane trying to get rid of evidence. Jason says he agreed to help Zach hide Holly's body. During the trial, all four men essentially blame each other to a greater or lesser extent. The interesting question is why the four men should have kidnapped Holly of all people. After all, she was sitting in her parents' house. This is not necessarily the classic place from which a stranger is kidnapped. At some point in court, a theory will emerge that could explain the whole thing. It is suspected that Zach, Dylan, Shane, and Jason had an appointment with Holly's brother Clint on April 13, 2011. And that was to show him how to make meth. Holly is said to have been upset about it and shouted at the men. The four suspects then allegedly kidnapped her. Clint Bobo denies the whole methamphetamine thing, and it is not publicly known how the public prosecutor's office even came up with this and whether there is any evidence for it. Clint says he never did drugs and only met one of the accused, Dylan, once or twice. And according to him, he only woke up when Holly was already outside with a man. The description that Clint Bobo provides of the man does not match any of the accused, but it does match Terry Britt, who was initially the focus of the investigators. Ultimately, the focus during the trial is primarily on proving Zach's guilt. A neighbor claims to have seen a white truck in the neighborhood on the day of Holly's disappearance, and that's exactly what Zach was driving at the time. In addition, some of Holly's belongings were found scattered throughout the city, presumably to cover his tracks. However, some writing materials were found on the very street where Zach used to live. He is also said to have told a friend that he would tie her up just like he did Holly Bobo, and that she would never see her again. Although there is only circumstantial evidence and the statements against Zach are based on hearsay, he is ultimately found guilty of Holly Bobo's murder. He receives a life sentence, but he continues to deny everything. In 2018, his brother was also sentenced to prison. Dylan, who set the whole thing in motion by giving his testimony, accepted a so-called Alford plea. In this case, you are convicted without admitting your guilt. However, you get a lower sentence than with a regular verdict. That's why Dylan only has to serve 35 years in prison for his involvement in the crime against Holly Bobo. Because Jason's extensive testimony made Zach's conviction possible in the first place, he was only sentenced to 8 years, and is now free again. Zach continues to maintain his innocence and has filed several motions for a new trial over the years. Even if Zach really is the culprit, there are still so many questions in this case. Above all, the question of how Holly was abducted in the first place. Many people found their brother Clint's description of the morning strange. And no matter what theory you come up with, there are always gaps somewhere. The only thing that is clear is that Holly was murdered and her life was cut short at just 20 years of age. Holly was the cousin of a country singer named Whitney Duncan. In her honor, Whitney and her band Post Monroe released a song called Better Place. So Holly lives on today in the music of her cousin and in the memories of all who loved her. I would really like to hear your theories. Even after doing research, I still haven't the slightest idea what might have happened to Holly. Do you have any ideas? What do you find particularly strange about this case? Please feel free to let me know in the comments. I always love reading from you guys. And especially with this mysterious case, we can all certainly use more input. By the way, you also support the channel, because any interaction increases the likelihood that the video will be suggested to people who have not yet subscribed to Insolito. Otherwise, there is not much more to say. I wish you a good morning, noon, or evening, or whenever you watch the video, and hope to see you again in the next video. Until then, ciao guys!